Let's take the conversation around the recent announcement from the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, where the President approved the next step of reopening of the economy as a gradual process. First is that the churches and mosques, they can begin to reopen, but they must follow the guidelines stipulated by the PTF, which is chaired by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. Boss Mustafa. There's been a lot of debates, but let me just give you some insight into what some states are doing. Lagos State says they will reopen the church and mosque, 19th, that's for the mosque, 21st for the churches. But the Lagos State government, through its Safety Commission, has said they must follow the register, they must register and follow those guidelines for easy contact tracing. Other states, like Ogun State, have also agreed to reopen religious worship centers also from the 19th. And across the country, governors are emphasizing the need for religious leaders to adhere to the guidelines. On the other hand, citizens feel that it's not too fair. Some leaders have also come out to say that there's no need to reopening the church or the mosque if these guidelines are being stipulated. I mean, it will really stifle interactions. But let's get your first response on this next phase of gradual reopening of the economy. Particularly, let's start with the religious worship centers.
Thank you, Otto. I think, like we all know, it's a difficult period.
Yes.
But and I think the steps the government has taken, in my view, is a good step. Let's start a gradual opening. On the religious worship centers, I would have probably said no.
You should not at all?
No, they shouldn't at all.
Why?
Wow, thank you. You see, you just gave us a statistics nationwide.
Yeah.
With our incapacitation with respect to our capability to test, we have 11,000 cases nationwide.
Yeah.
How many have recovered? How many have been discharged? So if you look at that ratio, and from what we are hearing that is taking place at the isolation centers across the country, it's humongous. I'm telling you, I think from some of the information some of us have, if the government should tell us what is happening at the isolation centers, the religious bodies will feel differently. Now, my question therefore is...
So are you saying that this is being managed?
It's being managed. Yes, they have to manage the information. So, but you see, the religious leaders that are complaining, I hope they are not, all right? They should make visits to the isolation centers and see the kind of operation that is going on there. It's so easy for you to sit in one place, you know, like Femi tweeted the other day, a couple of weeks ago or so, when he says...
Oh, that's the chairman of...
the chairman of ProShare. Yeah. He said that the church is not... he said the church is not dead. The building is closed. The church is not closed, but the building that is... It's just for a short period. We're all religious in one form or the other, but we need to also be realistic. How many of these pastors, with all the pomp and pageantry, how many of them have visited the isolation centers to get a feel of what exactly is happening in their states and in what is happening there?
So you propose that the faith-based leaders should find a way and visit, or just
they
see what's
need,
happening
yes,
at
because
isolation centers?
they need to visit so that they can have
Because
a measure.
They've been donating various support.
Donating is fantastic.
Yeah.
I applaud that. But they need to visit the place and see, even if it is words of encouragement, but as a way of them getting an insight, a first-hand insight of the chaos that is taking place in those places, of what our frontline officers, our frontline personnel, what our health workers are going through. It's touching. I'm telling you the truth. I've lost 2 friends to COVID.
2 friends?
Yes, I've lost 2 friends to COVID.
Wow. Accept my sympathy about that. I mean, I could understand your perspective.
So if you understand this and you get close to what is happening, because it probably has not touched any one of them directly. When it does, and you see the efforts the health personnel put to save such a life, and yet that life goes. You would tamper that untoward aspiration.
Which explains the approach of people like Governor Nasir El-Rufai, Governor Sheyi Makinde, and even the governor of Bauchi.
So I like what the government has said, and they've given the state governments the way to say, follow the final instruction or the guidelines of the state government. Service not more than 1 hour. Have a register in your church for everybody that is coming. Let them log it in.
And they must wear face masks inside the church.
And they must wear face masks, and they must keep those distances. So it doesn't, it's for our own good.
What for you is the best distancing measure? Lagos State is saying 40% attendance, 0 to 15 years should not be there, 65 years and above shouldn't be, but that between 16 to 60.
They say 65 years and above. I would rather bring down to 50. You know why?
Why?
You see, you need to know the health conditions of people in this age bracket. The people that managed to have been victims, that have gone, they are below 45. They are below 45.
You know, they were saying that above those
but because they had underlying health
yeah.
issues before this happened, diabetes, high blood pressure, maybe typhoid, various kind of illness that were there before. Okay, so and a lot of people are still what they call asymptomatic. Yeah. So you can imagine. So I think I want to commend our government. I'm a very believer of Nigeria and Africa, like we discussed the other time. So I think we'll do well. I think so far, for me, fantastic guidelines. We should just make all that we can to just keep to them.
I feel so, because the government has shown sensitivity.
Absolutely.
At the federal level. And one thing we must mention here is the bipartisan nature in approaching this, which we saw during the Ebola time too. Nigeria always has a way of coming together and saying, look, let's work together. We've seen all the governors, 36 governors, irrespective of party, meeting with the vice president and the president to look at all these measures, because you see that every governor is taking it seriously, particularly with the religious worship centers and all the other places of reopening. So this is speaking to all Nigerian citizens that this is a time for constructive engagement,
absolutely,
not attacking the personality of the president or the vice president or the governors, because they are accountable to our security and safety and want to take those measures. But any constructive engagement is welcome and not creating tension in the country. But there is one issue of concern to looking at this whole pandemic, and that's the process of logistics. The reopening of the airports, June 21st. They'll start with 5. That's Lagos, Abuja, Kano, Owerri, and then Port Harcourt. The aviation industry will have to show that composure and maturity in ensuring that they follow the safety guidelines. In just 1 minute, what is your thought on that? Do you see an effective adherence? Because this is another pathway that we saw people that had these cases coming into the country from the foreign land. They will not quickly close the airport that time. Again, there's a need to ensure that we follow the guidelines.
The airports that are opening are actually for domestic flights.
I know, domestic, yeah.
That's one. 2, I'm also aware that all of them are doing top preparation, taking all these precautions that you're concerned. I think, trust me, Nigeria we've moved forward. These organizations are doing their best for our safety and protection. So I would rather we give them the benefit of doubt. You know, because maybe by virtue of opportunities and privileges that one has, one is aware of what they are doing. And if you're also aware, the government have been fumigating all the airports, all the airports. They've been fumigating all the airports, you know, to make sure that the environment is not only that. Then they also having, when they resume, I understand they already have a procedure to refresh the fumigation as people come in and as they go. As the case may be.
I want the clarifications around interstate travel. You know, governors, they said they want to maintain that because, you know, movements by road is a quicker means, because public transport, people are in the bus, I mean, across the country, movements and all that. Guidelines have to be set effectively to curb any influx. You've talked about the fact that this is a serious matter. So interstate travel, from the standpoint, the ban should be left to review it after this phase, 2nd to 29th.
I think so. Again, there is no harm in trying. Let's see what we could do. And let's see, the good news again is that the World Health Organization is also reviewing, they are conducting additional investigation on the hydrochloroquine, the vaccine, just to look at it again. Vaccines have been tried. I'm even specific about the hydrochloroquine, which they said no before, don't go ahead. You get my point? So they are trying to, I guess, improve it to see what people can do. What improvements can be done so that to minimize the allergies and the side effects that people are getting. I think so. In all, I was listening to a podcast. Was it a podcast or listening to a professor emeritus in Oxford, a professor of mental health in Oxford, and that lady was talking about this is the first time science has proven itself with respect to the speed to getting a vaccine, to solve an issue. And I think we're making fantastic progress.
All right, let's move to our conversation today. It's really global burning issue, national issue. Someone said that Nigerians are more concerned about George Floyd and the protests in the US, but forget that in Nigeria there are issues of national concerns that we also need to protest against in a very constructive and peaceful manner. We've seen George Floyd, I mean, that has sparked massive protests across the US and across the world. I mean, people have made case that every life matters. I don't like saying Black Lives Matter. Every life matters, and I like the concept you're bringing today, equality and justice. You're not saying one race. Is about racism in all its gamuts. It's about tribalism in all its gamuts, and then the last part, which is a very burning issue in Nigeria and even various parts of the globe, rape. Let's begin with the perspective around equality and justice, and then you can move on with your presentation. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts.
Well, on equality and justice, you find out that people need to recognize that society has evolved. The way we used to govern before and the way we used to treat one another has changed. But because of our mental modes and the laws that we have not made, both laws and enforcement that we have not made in order to know how to deal with these issues, you get my point? That's why we are struggling. So I'm hoping that what I will just share is just an awareness to allow us
to go, because this is a very interesting topic of concern, and it will be nice to hear your perspective.
Thank you. Morning, viewers, and happy weekend. I hope you're doing well. Like I was just sharing with my anchor earlier on equality and justice. Like you all know, we're in a unique season. Look at the issue of the death in the US, or several such deaths, which he mentioned. So the question we're asking, or what I just want to share with you to understand, is to create an awareness for every one of us with respect to what equality is and what justice is. And in starting this presentation today, I want to start with a quote by a guy I follow on Twitter. His name is Vala Ashfar. And Vala was talking about, he tweeted earlier this morning, and it made so much sense, that the most expensive mistake is one that does not lead to a learning. From all the riots as a result of George Floyd's death and many others like him across the globe, the issue of racism is global. What are we learning? What are we learning out of this? I like to see, and that's why this quote is appropriate. Are we learning anything out of this? I'm not here to explain what equality is or what justice is. These meanings, the meanings of these words still have not changed. So my hope is that we'll be able to say, okay, fine, our courts for justice or are they for the law? Is the law for all? When you hear the various experiences of injustice, discrimination, bias that people of color have experienced over the years in the US and other white and brown-skinned countries, it's appalling. If you also had experience, maybe for people in my generation, when we were in university, we were in school with people from South Africa who were on our federal government scholarship, Nigerian scholarships. I remember there was a guy who made a statement. He said, John, you don't know what oppression is until you experience it. You don't know what oppression is until you experience it. So that's the question we're asking now. So I'm just asking, some of the cases that have been taken of unjust killing in the US as well as Nigeria, police brutality, the way our policemen have also been handling, and the snail pace of justice. So that's why I'm asking a question. Are our courts for justice or are our courts for law? Are our laws for everybody or for a few? So the question therefore is, at what point do we begin to experience these discriminatory tendencies? I said this presentation is about equality and justice, racism and tribalism. I am also not going to define what racism is or what tribalism is, but you know what it is. You and I have, at one point in time, have experienced it. But what I want to share is for you to understand what bias is, because that's the foundation. What bias is. And there is this guy, quite wonderful guy. If we know what bias is, it is easy for us to now begin to deal with the other aspect of what I'm going to talk later about unconscious bias. But we say bias is an inclination or a prejudice in favor of a particular person, thing, or a viewpoint. So this is what leads to what? Racism. This is what leads to what? Tribalism. This is what leads to what? Nepotism. So you need to understand what bias is. That's the foundation. So I'm hoping that if you're able to have this understanding, and I'm able to have this understanding, I've been doing some couple of works along this domain, a couple of years now, then you will understand that because each and every one of us are biased, we need to do something about it. We need to be aware about it. Now, another word I want to look at is the word unconscious. Because most of these attitudes, most of these behaviors, racism, tribalism, nepotism, why some of them are consciously done, majority are unconscious. So you need to understand that the foundation for which you and I begin to get this level of awareness and education for us to respond appropriately on a global scale is to understand what these words mean and how you and I, at one point in time, have exhibited it, and how we need to design better mechanisms to respond to this. It doesn't matter the climb where you are. Unconscious as an adjective, not awake, not aware of or responding to one's environment. Done or existing without one realizing it. When you are unaware of something as an adjective. As a noun, when you say the unconscious bias, if you use it as a noun, that's another part of speech, is the part of the mind, your mind, my mind, which is what? Inaccessible to the conscious mind, but which does what? Affects behavior and what? Emotions. One is an adjective, which you didn't know. The other one, the unconscious bias, the noun part, is now talking about what? Your actions and my actions in expressing racism, tribalism, nepotism. So you can now see. So when you see, when we talk about racism or when we talk about all those things, we're talking about bias. So if we have this understanding, if you and I have this understanding that most of the things you experience from other people, it is because of this. There's a guy, there's a global expert on very strong thought leader on diversity and inclusion. The guy's name is Howard Ross. He gave this definition of unconscious bias in 2008, and I want you to look at it carefully. He says, unconscious bias is our fundamental way of looking at and encountering the world driven by what? A hardwired pattern of making what? Unconscious decisions about others based on what? The way I feel safe, what I feel likable, what I feel is valuable to me, and what I feel is what? Is my competence. So unconscious bias has to do with me, the way I do what? Relate to other people. So when you see racism, it's a hardwired pattern. Where is it hardwired? The mind. Recall the earlier definition I told you about the unconscious bias, the now definition of it. It's in the mind. So by default, the average white man and brown human being, manifests unconscious bias until you probably give them feedback to say, oh, by the way, you made this statement or you responded this way. So you begin to wonder, why are they doing this? So I am hoping that if you take this definition of Howard Ross, he is a known leader globally on diversity and inclusion. And he's been doing lots of talk, but we have passed the era of talking. We are now in the era for we to do what? Take steps. Because if we are not able to address these aspects of you and of us, these are our behaviors of racism, tribalism, nepotism, okay, we will have less issues. When we talk about racism, it's mainly between white and black. It doesn't have any other story. White and black, brown and black. When we talk about tribalism, if you bring it down, we're talking about what? The tribal conflict, the tribal preference, the tribal bias you manifest within your community, within your state, within your country. So you can imagine. You can also extend this to gender issues. Why we've prevented a lot of our women from aspiring to positions that they deserve, with the same qualification, with the same experience, or with the same competency level with their male folk. So, if this is so, what then, how do bias manifest? They manifest in oppression, suppression, deprivation, intimidation, injustice. People don't get the right justice when they come to the courts because they are not of a certain color. They are not of a certain race. They are not of a certain tribe. Or because they are not of a certain what? Social status. It manifests in inequality. Because if you are deprived because you're of a certain color or a certain tribe, you are not likely going to be seen to be at the same level with the other person that is manifesting those biases towards you or those biases towards you. And lastly, how does it manifest? Corruption. You don't want to believe? Trust me. Because when you look at these manifestations in which people experience it, you are deprived of certain opportunities because of where you are from, because of the way you look. You are not given justice because of your probably social status, or because of where you come, or because of your belief. All of these things are the way bias manifests itself in our system, in our society. And right now, the world is screaming, we need to do something about this. What are the consequences of bias? If they manifest in these areas, in these expressions of oppression, you know what apartheid was before, okay? Apartheid was all about bias. If they manifest in all of these, what are their consequences? It's what we're experiencing today. Hunger, starvation, poverty, wars, riots, rage, underdevelopment. Is that not what are the consequences of what we are talking about? That's what we are talking about. So my angle or my argument in how to deal with the issue of racism, tribalism, as the case may be, is to understand the foundation of which this is based, so that we all can develop that consciousness to be able to respond to one another better. So this is just all what I'm saying. And I'm hoping that where you are today, ask yourself, how often do I ask for feedback from people of other races, people of other tribes, people of other gender, people of other beliefs? What is my response to them? What is my default position to them? Because this is what happens, and it takes only education and awareness for you and I to be able to free ourselves and manage our biases better. Because we express these unconsciously, not knowing the harm it is causing to the other party. And the riots we've seen in the US and all over the world recently, with respect to the George Floyd death, is what? These are the consequences of what? Racism. Principally bias, a prejudice. Because they have been what? Deprived of access to education, good education. They've been deprived of opportunities. The same thing in your nation, in your country, as a result of various tribal conflicts, or various tribal biases, okay? So there is no trust. So trust has been broken in the system. So it's important for you to understand that this is what is. So if you look at what we've been talking about, before I go to talk about rape, you will understand that racism, tribalism, the foundation of it is bias. None of us, all of us here are biased. But to what measure? The level of your ability and my ability to be able to work, relate with other people of other color, of other beliefs, of other gender or sex type is a function of the education, the awareness, we call it cultural awareness that you have. Okay, that's the little I have to share on bias. Let's come back home. Like you know, rape has been trending in our climb recently and has been and is also a global issue. I call it the uncomfortable truth. Why? Because it manifests itself either as sexual harassment or sexual intimidation. Unfortunately, because of the fact that society is designed around a male-man world, we don't want to discuss it. When I say we, male man does not want to discuss it. Because most of the time, we are the ones that manifests these. And its most vicious form of rape is what? The sexual assault without consent. Look at what we've been hearing. A 70-year-old woman raped sometime during the week in Nigeria. by a 16-year-old boy, I'm told. But how can we deal with this? How can all of us arise to deal with this? Because that's what I want to focus on. Why we are all sad and unhappy, we feel uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable truth. By cultural biases, by our cultural linings and our various religious beliefs, that is not making us to get the appropriate awareness and education preparing us. We have a new generation of citizens that are aware and uneducated. So we must help them and help ourselves so that we can have a more equitable and just society. So what are the way forward I am proposing? Like I'm doing now. We need more awareness and education from primary school down to university. We need to talk more. We need to educate our people more. No matter how advanced society is going, there are certain things we need to tell all of our children and our wards and ourselves, employees and our employers. And I know a number of organizations are creating such structures in their HR functions to manage issues of sexual harassment or sexual intimidation, as the case may be, or even sexual assault at work. Another suggestion I want to give is justice for all. We must give ears to all the parties, the victims and the actors, the perpetrators. But let both parties be aware that there is justice that is waiting for whoever is found culpable. All we are saying that there is a new wind that is blowing and we all need to change. We all need to embrace the new generation of citizens that we have, that are knowledgeable, that are requesting and are calling out for some awareness. We must accept to change, both the male man, like I call them, and the female man. There are certain things you and I need to do consciously. We must consciously take this into praise. We must also take what? Responsibility for all of our actions. We must be willing to take responsibility. So, which is why the education is very important. Which is why a strong justice system must be put in place. If we have this, Otto, the preponderance for rape will do what? Will reduce. So as I round up, what am I saying? I am saying that it is time for us to deal head-on with the issues of racism, tribalism, and rape. It is time for us to look at equality and justice with a different lens, with a holistic lens, so that we can have a better society. It is time for change. It is time for every one of us to change. And I'm hoping that with this little that I've shared, and you can go do more digging, we will have a better society. Otto, that's where we are. That's my conversation for today.
Very illuminating perspective you've brought, because I've heard people talk a lot about this whole case, but I've not really heard this interesting perspective on how we can address it. You know, my takeaway from what you've said, I mean, the issue of bias, the unconscious bias is that part that really caught my attention. And the effects of this racism and tribalism is huge. I mean, even in Africa, remember Rwanda's case, it's huge. It's huge. So my take is that the media, which is a big influencer in society, needs the orientation to understand its role in addressing that unconscious bias, in addressing all the sensitive issues with high level objectivity. because the media plays a very important role in information, dissemination, and enlightenment.
Which is why, sorry Otto, before you don't say I interrupted you, which is why Trump is talking about fake news.
President Donald Trump.
Because of the volume of what? Misinformation that is being spread out by media. Because people are paid. We should move away from that and look at the whole picture. Give what is right to create a whole society that we all can live in.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Mr. John Wesey. This was a very interesting perspective, and there's a lot to learn from, and I believe our viewers will learn more from it, and we can have a better society free of the scourge of racism, tribalism, and the tide of rape. That'll be all for this conversation on strategic management. It was nice having Mr. John Wesey speak on equality and justice, looking at the critical issues that are really shaking our society that needs to be addressed, from racism to tribalism and rape. We must change our orientation. We must move on. We must address those unconscious biases that can make us cause a lot of chaos in society. Till we come your way again, you can join our website www.proshng.com to watch our videos, read our news reports and analysis and stories. Strategic Management also has its page where you can also get our videos and interesting insights from what our special guest, Mr. John Wesey, a strategic management consultant, gives. His Twitter handle is there at John Wesey. You can always reach out to him if you want some insights on leadership, strategy, and management. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Stay safe, and let's make this happen again next Saturday.